That's how they ended up the way they were. That's all. And then the Attorney General said, I think this concept relates to this one. I think this concept relates to this one. And so you got to make these type art and these type art. But they always remain in the order of the city charter provisions being effective. That's the only answer to your question. That would have made sense too.
Okay. Other questions from the panel? Then we will be reading some questions from the audience. There's still time, audience members.
I do have one other question. To sell property, to do a number of things. I guess it's proposal 6. It requires a vote of 4 commissioners. It used to be a vote required of 6, and that was a simple majority or a majority.
Right. That was a super majority.
Super majority when it was 6 of 9.
Right.
Is this a super majority also, the 4? It's almost everybody has to agree?
It is almost everybody, and it was one of those mathematical, what's the super majority of 5? And 4 was the closest thing when we did the math.
All right.
And so that's how we arrived at 4, because there was no perfect equivalent to the 6 to the 9. So,
all right.
That's how we arrived at 4.
Thank you.
Other questions? Otherwise, Mr. Burns, maybe would you read an audience question?
Yes, this is from the audience. Why are these changes being proposed, and why is so much power being given to the city manager in these changes? Who will the city manager be accountable to?
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to answer your last question first. City manager is hired by the city commission and answers directly to the city commission. So that being said, in all respects, the city manager reports to the city commission. That's very clear from the charter. And then I think your first question is, why are these being proposed? And again, I guess I just go back to, as far as my knowledge goes, which is to explain that we were asked to look at certain provisions within the charter and draft them in a legally permissible way to get them before the voters. I can't really go much beyond that in telling you. I mean, the effects, again, I can explain to you, and those would be a reduction in the size of the commission, a reduction in the term, elimination of staggered years, and definitely a consolidation of power to the city manager, whoever that might be at the time. But that, as far back as I can go in terms of motivation for you as far as that first question. And your second one was, why is so much being shifted to the city manager? And again, the way that this was sort of presented to me was, make this consistent, because we got this all over the place in the charter. We've got the city manager in charge of certain people. We've got the city commission in charge of other people. Let's clean this up. Who should be, and it's very common and consistent to have the city manager in charge of all of the department heads, not some of the department heads. There might have been a rationale for that at one time, but having the city manager be in charge of all of the department heads and having the city commission be in charge of the city manager. That's why. That being said, you've always been considered a city manager strong form of government. That wouldn't change. If anything, this is more in keeping with that characterization.
I do have a question here from the audience, and it's still along with the same questions. Is this being proposed due to population decrease? Decline, decrease?
To my knowledge, that was not the motivating factor, but I would be speculating. I do think that I personally thought it was unusual to see 4 wards carved out of a city of this size. I thought that was unusual because the population of approximately 10,000, 4 wards is a lot of different wards. So it did seem to be, and if you look at the charter from start to finish, again, I think you'll be amazed at the provisions, chapter after chapter of obsolete provisions having to do with all sorts of different boards and committees that do not exist today. And so, yeah, I think it does have to do with population, although that was not one that was articulated to me directly. It made sense to me to change this charter in keeping with the population as it exists.
have a bunch of questions from audience members. The first one is, name some cities, and maybe that you know of, that have requested downsizing of local government, and what was their process?
Well, the process would have been the same. The legal process would have been the same. Gosh, it's hard to recall off the top of my head. Miller Canfield's been working with local government since the 1900s, so I'd hate to name a city and say, oh, that was by initiatory, that was petition. Let's see. The second part of the question is by what process? Is that what you said? Okay. By that, I'm assuming they mean, was it initiatory petition versus the city commission? Let's see. I'm trying to think where I last worked on a city that did it. Let's see, from 9 to 5. I can't think off the top of my head. I'm thinking maybe the city of Eastern Rapids reduced the number of commissioners a while ago. I've certainly seen the term shortened in a number of different places. Did you have a question to add to that? Or?
I know of a place, Berrien County, just reduced its commission from 13 commissioners to 12. Every 10 years, when the census is done, counties, I don't know what cities do, but counties look at the population and decide, and there is a panel, and the panel consisted of, let me see, I think 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And they meet up and they redraw lines and redistrict and all kinds of things. And as a result, Berrien County for the next 10 years will have 12 county commissioners instead of 13. I believe Van Buren County or Cass County, they made changes also. So I know it happens in the county. I don't know of a city, I can't say that one. It just happened in Berrien County where we live.
Right, and just for the purpose of being accurate, I would like to, I'm happy to get back with you on that. I can go look in our database and see who we've done this for. We have, 375 lawyers in our office, so before I start throwing out municipal names for you, I want to make sure I get that right. But I can certainly provide you a list of cities in particular who have made changes to their charters and how that process went down. I can tell you generally it's by the city commission as opposed to the citizens. And I'm not sure why that is, other than I'm not sure that a lot of citizens know that they have the right to put it on the ballot via petition. I don't think that many people know that they can do that. So,
I have a number of people are writing multiple questions on a single card, which is great. But I'm not going to ask 5 questions at once. But we will continue this for a while, and then I want to get our mayoral candidates involved, both in asking questions and in stating their positions. But I have 2 cards in front of me, and I think the first question of 5 on one of them and the only question on the other go together. So or at least they're the same theme. I'm going to read both questions. These are from different members of the audience. One person asked, and I'm going to interrupt myself. I think we've agreed. We are reading the questions exactly as they were written. And in case there's any question about that. So a person who wrote 5 questions asked the following question. Why wasn't the city of Benton Harbor citizens included in suggestions of charter changes? And then another person wrote what I think is a similar question. Given the fact that the Benton Harbor City Charter celebrated its 90th, it's hard to read it, I think it's 90th or 40th anniversary this year, why 90th? Why has its originality been indicted as outdated, and why were there no public hearings on the proposed changes?
Okay, I'm going to try to jot some notes down, so just re-ask if I forget.
Sure.
I guess as far as the first question goes, why weren't the citizens involved? I guess just from a, I can't tell you why citizens did not initiate a petition to amend the charter. That right has always been there. So it's in your charter, it's in the Home Rule City Act, it's out there. I can't tell you why that has not occurred. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So I guess that's the first question. Second question?
Well,
Why now?
I think
Why
the
these
second,
changes now?
I think the second question really comes down to, there was a statement in it, but why there were no public hearings.
Okay. Well, frankly, no public hearings are required. It's going to a vote. It doesn't get much more sort of democratic than that. So there aren't many things that have to go to a vote. And so in that sense, that's the most involving process that I know of in the law. And that being said, this is as close to a public hearing as I've ever seen prior to any charter changes, because this is not required by law. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that no public hearings are required, and the fact that this exists, I guess this sort of seems like one to me. So, but from a purely legal standpoint, that's just not part of the process. It does get published in the paper, and it does go, again, to a vote. So that's the public part of the process here.
I have a couple that aren't related to any others that I'm going to read. One is, if the EFM is no longer a law, how will these proposed changes be repealed?
If the EFM, I assume they're talking about Act 4?
Yes.
If the EFM law, Act 4, if it gets repealed, how will these changes be repealed?
Yes.
If these changes get approved by the only portion of this that is peculiar to Act 4 is the form it took in getting to the voters. But beyond that, if the voters approve this, those laws are valid. They don't get repealed unless you amend your charter again, which you can, you can do that. You can initiate the change and do it again. So first of all, I'm not sure. I know that that's a possibility, it being repealed. I don't know that that would happen before November, and so I think the law would probably still be in place up to the time of the vote, and then again, ultimately, the voters decide whether these pass or not, and once they pass, they're valid laws. They don't get repealed.
I'm just going to note that I had a question that I believe you've answered, but I want the audience member to know. This person had asked, if these amendments pass, is it possible to rescind or reverse the actions? I think you answered that, but in a word?
Yes, you can always amend and revise your charter again, and I encourage you to look at that process in the Home Rule City Act and in the city charter itself. You have to look at both, and the Code of Ordinances. You have to kind of read it all together and find out what the process is. But certainly, I mean, it's hard to do, as I think it's becoming clear, but it can be done. You can change it again, certainly.
I'm going to ask the second question, and then I'm going to clarify, as you did, with something that may have been answered. One question is, how much cost is associated with the current commission, and how much are we saving with the changes? I
am not the right person to answer that. You got to ask the people in your city offices. I do not have those numbers in front of me. So.
However, that may be a little troublesome because this was not brought, this resolution was not brought by the city commission, if you will. It was, is that information, I guess I should ask a follow-up for this citizen, is that information something that citizen can get if they go to City Hall now?
Absolutely. Those are all public records. You could do it pursuant to a Freedom of Information Act request. You might be able to do it more informally than that, but absolutely those are public documents by definition. So you can see all of the city's financials. Absolutely. And the emergency financial manager certainly has access to those calculations as well.